Hey guys, so for today's video, I'm going to be teaching you some watercolor techniques that I use that have definitely helped me. So all you're going to need is just a piece of paper, some water, and your watercolors. So let's get started. So here's a few tips. So I'm going to show you what too much water looks like and too little water looks like and what it should look like when it's just the right consistency. Let's use too much water as our first example. If you use too much water, it's going to come out looking kind of like this, like gloppy, and the water is just going to like build up on the top, and it shouldn't spread like this. It shouldn't, like you shouldn't place your paint down and it shouldn't go all over the place. Like that is not what you want. Here's a closer look at watercolor with too much water. If I put my brush down, I can still move the water and the paint around. This isn't too bad if you have a large surface you need to cover, but it's going to spread everywhere and bleed, and it just does not look very good. Now, here's what too little water looks like. You don't want to do this either. As you can see, there's barely any paint going on, and just the water from my brush. If I go back into the color I was using, it's just not going to show up. It's going to be very thin, and it's not going to be what you want. As you can see, the coverage is very thin, which is also could be known as it's not very opaque, which means you can barely even see it. Another instance is that it's just too dry, and it'll come out looking streaky like this. You can barely even see it, but it is there. Okay, I'm going to refilm the part of me doing this watercolor session because I was looking back at my footage and I realized I didn't really explain this very well, so let's do this again. So you take whatever you're holding your water in, you move your brush around, you want to get a good amount of water on that, but you also want to go off the sides and kind of just move your brush along it, and you should see some water dripping down onto your cup and off of your brush. Your brush should just be damp. You don't want it to be too wet. So then you take your watercolor and you choose whichever color you want, and you dip your brush in there and you start painting. As you can see, this is a really nice combination of the two different techniques. There is no water pooling at the sides, and it's not too light. It is just right and perfect. So just to get a better look at that, here's what too much water will look like. It does look kind of cool depending on what kind of project you're doing. Here's what too little or not enough water looks like. It's too thin, and it's very streaky. And then when you have just the right amount of water on your brush and color, it should look like this. There's no water pooling anywhere, and it's just a nice consistency. Okay, now let's move on to the next part of the watercolor lesson, which will be learning blending. So blending is basically just a gradient between two different colors where one color kind of moves into another color. It's hard to explain, but it'll be easier to see when, we start doing it. But to understand blending and the colors that would go together, you have to understand the color theory. And to understand the color theory, we need to use our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. So to understand what artists call color theory, we need to draw something called the color wheel. And I'm sure you must have seen it before, but we can draw it at home instead of buying one. So you don't have to do this, but I'm going to draw it just so it's easier for you to understand color theory. So you just want to draw a little triangle for red over here. It doesn't really matter where you draw it. You just want to color it in a red little triangle right there. That is good. That's what you want. So next you want to draw a yellow triangle right, not next to it, but kind of diagonal. Just like that. Perfect. And then you want to draw blue, which would go right here. Again, that was a little bit long. It's not going to be perfect, but you want to draw all these triangles connecting because we're going to end up making this a circle. Alright, next we're going to draw different colors that I'm sure you've seen before because these are all colors of the rainbow. So red and yellow, when they mix, they create the color orange. So between the two of them, you're going to want to draw an orange triangle. Next, between let's see. Let's go with blue and yellow. Blue and yellow create the color green. So in between them, you're gonna want to draw a green triangle. So I've made my blue triangle, a little bit wonky, and my circle does not look fantastic, but it's just to get the right idea. So blue and red make purple. So in between the blue and the red triangle, you're gonna want to draw a purple triangle. Now, as you can see, this color wheel looks very funky, but that's okay. It doesn't need to look perfect. Alright, so on the color wheel, I'm just going to label a few things. First, yellow, orange, red, purple, blue, and green. Just so that it can help us when we are labeling things in the future. Okay, so next we learn a few things about color theory. Opposite colors, I don't know if I'm spelling that right. I think it's 1P, it doesn't matter. Opposite colors do not blend. You cannot blend the two of them because the color that it will make is brown. It will not look good. It will look really gross. So let's say, for example, you do not want to blend the colors red and green. You don't want to blend the colors yellow and purple. And you don't want to blend orange and blue. These are the simplest rules in color theory. If I blended orange and blue, that would make brown. And I can show you that when I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, so I have orange on my brush. So if I take orange and then I take blue, it's a little bit hard to see, but the color that they're creating in the middle is a really ugly shade of brown. If you needed a brown paint, for example, this could be useful. However, if you're trying to blend the two colors together, it's not going to work. And then it's just two examples of these colors. Red and green would make a different shade of brown, and purple and yellow would make different shades of brown. If you needed brown paint, this could be useful. However, if you're just trying to blend colors, like I said before, it's ugly, it's not going to work, it's not going to be a very smooth blend. Now, colors that are next to each other, these can blend. So these will make a good color. You can see that clearly. So red and orange, for example. Purple and blue. And green and yellow is a little bit iffy, but it does work. Now those are just a few examples, but if I take, let's say, my red paint, right? Now that's a little bit hard to see, but you can see that that's red. Make it a little bit more opaque. Anyway, so we got red, and next to red, as you can see, is orange or purple. So if I take my purple paint and work with it a little bit, I'm going to do this off camera. Hold on a second. It is a little bit hard for the camera to pick up, but that is a very smooth blend between red to purple. And it's just because these colors are very similar to each other on the color wheel, and they're next to each other. I don't have purple and red written down, but orange and yellow, blue and green, these are all combinations that can blend together very nicely and smoothly. Okay, so now we have, let me focus. Okay, there we go. So now we have our color wheel, and we are going to start blending now with our watercolor paints. So they're up there. Can't see them. So let's do colors that we know can blend together. I'm going to use purple and blue for mine. Okay, I zoomed out a bit so you can see better. So I've got my water, my paintbrush, my paint, and my paper, and also my color wheel so that I can keep it in mind while I'm blending. So let's take my brush, right, there you go. And I'm going to take purple as my starting color. As you can see, I, put my brush up against the side so I didn't use too much paint. So when blending, I didn't do this at first, but I definitely should have. So I'm gonna zoom in a bit so you can see it better. But you want to go almost in zigzag shapes, up and down as you move across. And I want a little bit more color. So I'm starting over here, just moving up and down and up and down with my first color perfectly in half, and it makes it a little bit easier when we're blending. As you can see also, I accidentally used a little bit too much water, and if you make this mistake, it is totally okay because I do it all the time and I've been painting for years. I normally go downwards so I can get all the paint to pool down, all the water to pool down at the bottom, and I scoop it up off of my paint section, and it makes it look a little bit better and a little bit easier to manage. So now I'm going to be using my blue paint. So I scrape against the sides, make sure I don't make the same mistake I did before, and I take my blue paint, and next to it I move up and down. Fix up the sides, and there you go. I might have used a little bit too much water here, but it's not too big of a deal. I didn't use too much. So yeah, there you go. Now with the color you just used, in my case it's blue, I'm going to go up against the purple and fight for dominance, as I'd like to say. So the purple and the blue at first you'll have to layer them because they'll want to both, you know, be on the top, if that makes any sense. They want to be above each other. But to fix this, you want to go sideways right by the crease, where the crease kind of, and I used a little bit too much water here, so I'm just fixing that up, going down. And you just want to play with it a little bit. Eventually you will get that blend that you want, as long as you don't use two opposite colors, because otherwise you'll just end up creating the color brown. So I'm going to do this a little bit more off camera. I'm not finished yet, but I did end up using too much water, which, like I said, is okay. It's not terrible if you make that mistake a few times. I did that too. So I use, another tactic to use is use a napkin and just dab it down. And when you lift it, you got up all the extra water and sometimes a little bit of pigment too. But that's okay. So I finished blending the two colors together, and as you can see, it's a very nice and smooth blend between the purple and the blue. And you can't really tell where it begins or where it ends, and that's how you know you did it right. Don't be afraid to play with it a little bit, because it will be a little bit difficult to get the perfect blend, but it will happen. And another tip that I use is not to wash my brush in between picking colors while I'm doing the blend. Like when I grab my purple and I start blending, and I grab my blue and I start blending, I don't wash my brush in between, because it's just kind of unnecessary. It just honestly makes it a little bit harder for yourself, so don't do that. And then when I'm all finished, when all is said and done, I just use my brush, you know, swipe to the side, and it helps really blend the whole thing out. So that's really it. Those are all the tips that I have for you guys. When buying watercolors, I guess, I would buy, honestly, cheap dollar store sets. Maybe like, I don't know, anything from like Michael's could work. You don't have to be too expensive, like just a set like this could get you really far. And I would not use, if they give you like a little flimsy plastic brush, I wouldn't use that. It doesn't really work that well. I would get a separate set of brushes, which can also be found at the dollar store, and aren't that expensive. For like a pack of brushes, it's not that bad. And you can use different sizes and stuff. Don't be afraid to play around with what you've learned today. You know, you can feel free to use using too much water as a design, or, you know, do some blending or make brown. Like anything you want to do with what you learned today, totally go for it. Art is completely creative. You can do anything you want, and you can just have fun with it. So I really hope you learned something today, and I hope this helps.